afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Kunich. I'm the lead speaker today, and I will be giving a speech on what biomeds actually do. I know many of you presented the question before. You may be a nurse in a hospital, or someone interested in the field, or just curious, what does a biomed do? But before we get into that speech, I kind of wanted to introduce myself to everybody, give a brief synopsis of what I achieved, and then we'll get started. I encourage everyone to open up the pamphlet and follow through during the speech. It's okay if you would rather watch me present my speech, and then there'll be a Q&A for you guys later on, so you can ask me any questions I may have not covered in the topic today. So with that started, once again, I'm going to reintroduce myself. My name is Paul Kunich. I'm a biomedical engineer. Actually, I manage the three accounts here locally in Georgia. I manage a team of 5. My background's in electronics engineering, but I moved over to the biomedical engineering field about 10 years after I started. I've been an engineer for 15. I have 2 degrees. One's an associate degree in business. One is in electronics engineering. And we're not going to get into some of the other things that I like to do in my personal time, but I will leave you with a thought. And that would be, as you see me walking down the hallway or you run into me at the shop, is that what I hope I do today is be able to explain what do biomeds do. So with that said, let's get started. As you see, I have a few pieces of equipment here. I'll explain what these pieces are, and it's a little bit of a support material for my speech, as well as to give you guys an idea on daily life in biomed. So let me get started. If you just bear with me for a second while I get my notes up. I do apologize. I have a flip chart here. I did want to give this in an electronic format. However, the electronics failed today, so I will be giving it without a visual aid. So thank you again for coming. So let's get started. Can you guys tell me what, or at least think about, you see me in the hallway coming down, and you wonder, what does a biomed do? I once asked myself that question many years ago when a colleague of mine now had said to me, "Oh, I'm a biomedical engineer. I work at the hospital." "Well, what do you do?" I said to him. He said, "Well, what I'm about to tell you is I help save people's lives." "Well, you're a doctor?" "No." "Are you a cardiologist?" "No." "Well, then how do you save people's lives?" Well, he went on to say that it was by this equipment that you see today. It not only helps save people's lives, but it helps sustain a life until that patient is healthy. So there are many different elements to biomedical engineer. My chosen field was in a hospital setting. There's biomedical engineers that design this equipment you see, and they work with hospitals, with doctors. What are their specific needs? Do they need ECG? Do they need to cut the patient open? So which way do you like to do it? So the design team takes the ideas of how these pieces of equipment are used in the field, and they implement that into their design and then come out with an end product. And of course, they sell to the customer. And what these things do is they allow a patient to be seen by a nurse who can't physically be in the room to tell how somebody's heart rate's doing, how their blood pressure is. Do they see any irregularities? They can tell if a patient's almost ready to die. I mean, there's things that can help you live longer, healthier life. You just may need to stay in a long-term or short-term situation till you get better. But we'll talk about the hospital setting and what a biomed does, but just know that there are design teams, there's marketing teams that also help market these products to encourage the patient has a better life, or at least able to sustain that life moving home, moving back in the real world. So basically, to sum that up, is what a biomed does is they assist the medical staff, help make sure that that patient not only stays safe while they're in the hospital, but also follows up when they're gone home out of the hospitals. There's a piece of equipment that they take home, and it's monitoring devices, heart monitoring devices, to ensure that until treatment is completed, that this equipment keeps them safe. And so, like I said, a biomed will, on a daily basis, will do planned maintenance, which is like a car tune-up. It allows us biomeds to kind of give it a push, like a tune-up, to make sure it's doing what it says it's going to do according to the manufacturer's specifications. So we do some, like I said, some called planned maintenance, which we do take care of. It's like a health tune-up. And then there's the times when equipment breaks, whether it's because a user drops it or it just fails. Well, our job is to make sure it gets back up and running, because the nursing staff depends on this equipment as well as the patients. So what we do is we look after the maintenance of the unit. We also continuously service the unit. We asset tag the unit, so we do an inventory to make sure that we can keep count of equipment going in and out that enables us to know that this is safe to put out a patient. Well, in my particular role, I'm not just a biomedical engineer, I'm the biomedical engineering manager. So I have multiple accounts in the area where I'm responsible for technicians that do this work. And then what my job is not only to watch them and to make numbers and to make sure people are safe, but to also manage. And what does that mean by manage? What do you manage? Well, we have the inventory, we attend safety seminars, we report what we fix, what's the latest trend in technology. The customer will ask us for advice. Which one of these three monitors should we buy according to what we were trying to do? So there's a lot involved in my job, and of course, it's not only to promote customer service and stuff, but it's also to take care of the business side of the financials in my role, because once again, I'm contracted through the hospital, but GE is my employer. So with that being said, what a biomed does is ensure patient safety by fixing this medical piece of equipment. So that kind of gives you a short synopsis of what a biomed does. So what I wanted to do is move on to just describe these pieces of equipment, tell you briefly what they do so you get an idea of what we work on, what we encounter, and then I'll probably wrap it up a little bit more on what biomed does and a few statistics, and at the end we'll have a Q&A, question and answer session, and we can discuss this stuff further. Okay, so this guy here is what we call a defibrillator, and what a defibrillator does is when a patient's heart stops, it sends an electrical shock to that patient's heart to try and get it to restart. Well, it's similar to CPR, but this piece of equipment has a jolt to it, so that immediately may start that heart rhythm. So this is something we don't like to see being used as a biomed or a nurse, because we know that there's a liability, not only to shock ourselves, but if the patient's not revived, we may have to research records if something goes wrong beyond the the scope of what should happen. So this next guy here, and I'll hold this up a little bit because it's hard to see on the camera. Everyone, sorry, I should have held it up this way. Can everyone see? This is what we call a syringe pump. So a patient may need pain medication, and what they do is they put in a syringe, and instead of the nurse standing there and shooting into the patient's arm, it goes into a syringe, and this syringe pump pushes that medication through into the veins of the patient, and then that gives them the medication that they need to not be in pain. So it's a useful device for many different scenarios with patients. This next guy here is a feeding pump. And what that's used for is when patients can't eat solid foods and they're supposed to be eating things that are liquid, and they may not be able to chew or they may not be awake. So what they're able to do is, once again, into a syringe right into the arm, and they put a feeding tube in, and then the patient gets fed and they get the nutrients they need. So that's another critical piece of equipment. Now this last guy here is a patient monitor, and this is very essential for a hospital. It's a high-risk item, and that's because, and not as high as the DFib, but it's because this allows the nurse to see what's going on, even when she is not in the room. Okay, so if a heart patient goes in bradycardia, which is when the heart rate drops to a certain level, the monitor will alarm, tell that patient is heart's starting to stop, or maybe it's going too fast and they're going to have a heart attack. Well, they can be monitored centrally from this bedside monitor, and they can see that the patient's heart rhythm is not right. And even when it is right, they'll be able to see that on that monitor at the bedside or at the central. And once again, we realize nurses can't be everywhere to do everything, so these devices make the nurses and the doctors operate in a more, not only speedier fashion, but to assist them, because these days we can't have one nurse per room. It's just financially not feasible. So to alleviate some of the risk of not being in the room, we have devices that can be monitored centrally to take care of those needs. So you kind of now know what a biomed does, some of the equipment we look at, some of the risk involved for patients, whether it's a heart attack or maybe they're not breathing right, they go on a ventilator. All those are to aid the medical staff to take care of that patient. And what we do is aid the nurses and aid the doctors to make sure this medical equipment works. And my role, once again, is to make sure that my technicians are doing their job and that all equipment is up and running in a safe manner. And that involves many things which I won't discuss. I think we kind of briefly talked about them, but the one thing that I wanted to mention, and let me go back to my computer and pull up my notes, is that I work for one of the biggest companies, General Electric. They have many divisions dealing with locomotives, planes, turbines, wind turbines. I work in their healthcare division. So it's technology based in the medical field. And they're a conglomerate. They've are a multi-billion-dollar company. They are really vested in their employees. Many perks, many benefits of working for them, discounts, and one of the bigger things is the healthcare package that we get. And I'm briefly wanted to discuss a little bit about GE, just because I have some people in the room that are actually interested in being a biomed and working for a company. So if you can all bear with me, that would be great. But the average salary for a biomedical engineer, and this is not a manager, this is just a basic engineer, the median salary is $60,000 per year. Now, to some it may seem like a lot, but we all know that prices inflate.